I began my investigations into Celtic mythology with an article on the Dagda, and with the discovery that the Dagda is actually the god of wind, specifically. He is many things indeed, but his core essence is that he is the god of wind. And what many fail to fully appreciate is that the wind is multifaceted in Indo-European mythical understanding. That the wind is a force behind many of the forces we see manifesting in the world, and indeed behind many of the other gods, possibly behind all of the other gods. It is fitting that I began my investigations with the Dagda, because taking the road of Irish mythology all the way to its end, or rather back to its beginning, leads us again to the Dagda. Now it's clear that the Dagda is not himself the very first god born in the Irish genealogies. The Dagda has a couple of different genealogies, but most notably he is the son of Delvaith. That is to say, he's not the first god to appear in the lineage. However, this does not mean this is his only birth, as we see with so many other gods. Once we understand that Delvaith is the Purusha, as seen in other branches, we now understand why the Dagda is the son of the Purusha. The Purusha breathes out the wind. The breath of the Purusha becomes the wind of the manifested world. And so the birth we see of the Dagda from Delvaith, that is the wind of the manifested world being born here. However, that Purusha has been formed by the pre-cosmic winds before it. And so, from a broader understanding, we know that the wind existed before this Delvaith, and that the Dagda was then reborn from his breath. When we look at the 7 Lugiths, who then give birth to the one Lugith, Makon, who is the Purusha, aka Delvaith, we can trace to the origin of these Purushas, these 7 Purushas, and find that their progenitor is named Dáire. Now, in the Vedic mythology, we have the 7 Purushas giving rise to the one Purusha. The progenitor that gives rise to the 7 Purushas is called the vital airs, or the Pranas. Now, vital air, or Prana, is a name of wind. Wind and air and Prana, these are all interchangeable. Prana is the vital breath of the Absolute that exists within everything. It is a type of wind or air, and indeed these are treated interchangeably. That is why the vital airs are called either vital airs or pranas. And this is why air and prana are treated interchangeably with Vayu or Vata, the name of the wind god. And so we see that the wind, this primordial wind that is already in a chaotic state of multiplicity, it is winds plural. This is what gives rise to the 7 Purushas that then give form to the one final Purusha. Now, when we look at the 7 Lugiths, their progenitor is Dáire. But Dáire is known as a name or epithet of none other than the Dagda. So, what we have, uncannily, as the progenitor of the 7 Lugiths, who are the Purushas, is another name of the wind god, Dáire, aka the Dagda. So we can see that this name Dáire is just a primordial name of the Dagda, probably referring to his specific primordial form of Prana, of the vital breath or vital airs of the absolute state. Dahi Ohogun and other scholars have pointed out that Dáire is indeed simply another name of the Dagda in multiple places. Dáire itself is a name of a clan of what appear to be multiple Dáiras. So remember that there are multiple vital heirs, quote unquote, who are the Pranas in the Vedic version, and in the Irish version we have, somewhat confusingly, multiple Dáiras, multiple figures with this same name Dáire. And as Wikipedia says, Dáire, Doimthech, is referred to as one of the 5 kings of Tara from Munster, or alternatively, one of 5 Dáiras to rule at Tara. So here we have 5 Dáiras. And he may at one time have been partly identical with Dáire Mac Degad, Degad, the father of Curoi, although traditions concerning him, or them, appear to have diverged at an early period following regional paths. So here we have a couple of Dáiras that are interchangeable or have split apart from one. Scholars in medieval times were aware that both were believed to be ancestors of the Dáirina, that is, the clan of Dáire. The clan of Dáire are named the Dáirina, so these include many of the notable figures in the early part of the legendary myths. And T.F. O'Rahilly even believed that Curoi and Dáire are ultimately one and the same, so that the figure Curoi, who has other important legends, could even be another expression of this Dáire, who we can see is such an important figure. Now, I will say that the idea that Curoi is indeed another name of Dáire appears to be somewhat speculative, and I believe T.F. O'Rahilly and a couple of other scholars give credence to this idea, but it is not at all established or agreed upon. The more we investigate the Dagda and compare him to other Indo-European wind gods, the more connections appear. The Iranic wind god Vayu in the Avesta says, quote, "I'm called the one that spreads," unquote. And this connects to the important role of the wind in spreading seeds giving new life, restoring the world, making things become fertile. And as the Dagda is called the regeneration of the world of dry land, the Iranic Vayu is called renovator of the world in Aogo Medayaka 57 through 79. In this hymn of the Rig Veda, we see the themes of Vayu being the monarch of the universe, that is to say, the king of the world, and also that he is the germ of the world and of all deities, and also that he is invisible. He has a viewless shape. This is Rig Veda 10.168. Quote, "Borne on his car, with these for his attendants, the god speeds forth, the universe's monarch. Travelling on the paths of air's mid-region, no single day doth he take rest or slumber. Holy and earliest born, friend of the waters, where did he spring and from what region came he? Germ of the world, the deity's vital spirit, this god moves ever as his will inclines him. His voice is heard, his shape is ever viewless. Let us adore this wind with our oblation." So we have Dáire in this place as the primordial form of the Dagda, and indeed the primordial god. When we look at Dáire mac Dagda, we see a Dáire who is the son of Dagda. Now if you look at Degad, this figure, on Wikipedia, what you find is that scholars believe that the generations before Degad, Dagda, are fabricated. And this is what you always want to look for when trying to find where the mythic layer begins. What is the very starting point of the true ancient Irish myths, where they have been woven into fabricated genealogies leading back to historical or pseudo-historical figures. In the case of Breochan, in the Book of Invasions, Breochan is the Brahman, the Gaelic Brahman, and we can see that there is a seam where one section ends and the final section begins with Breochan. One section of a list of complex, seemingly fabricated genealogies leading back to historical and biblical figures ends with Breochan and his sons, and the final section picks this back up, beginning with Breochan. So we see a seam connecting to Breochan with fabricated genealogies, and then right at that seam we see a figure who appears to be the Gaelic Brahman. That's how we know, that's how we can reinforce and verify this idea that Breochan really was the very first figure in Gaelic myth. He is at the beginning where the seam has been stitched on, where the break between artificial fabricated genealogies and the mythical history begins. And so that verifies that Breochan is indeed the Brahman figure. In the case of Dagda, D-E-G-A-D, Dagda, he is the father of Dáire. Now, the Prana, or vital heirs, they are the very first thing arising from the Brahman, from one angle. And they are, in a way, the visible visible appearance of the Brahman, the symbol of the Brahman, in some sense. Now, Dagda is the father of Dáire, who is the wind god. The generations before Dagda appear to be fabricated, so we should cut them off and set them aside and look at Dagda. The name Dagda appears to mean something connected to the word for good or for God. As we saw with Breochan, one of his epithets was the good, and he is indeed the abstract name for this God principle, you could say, even though that is problematic. Still, it would not be hard to understand why some people would refer to the Brahman as God, even if that is not an entirely accurate description of what it is. When we look at Dagda, he has a name meaning either good or God. He seems to be a name for the highest God principle, possibly connected to goodness, or what Plato would call the good, which again is an epithet of Breochan himself. So, right where we would expect the highest God principle to appear, as the father of Dáire, we have exactly that. We have a break in the genealogies where before that it is artificial, and the first figure appearing is named something meaning either God or good, the good itself or the God principle itself. Thus, Dagda appears to be most likely an alternate name of Breochan, and these two genealogies converge at Dagda/Breochan, where Dáire is the vital heir Prana, which is the invisible, symbolic emanation or expression of that unmanifested Brahman. And we should point out that even the vital airs in the Vedic version are called non-existent. They are still in some sort of invisible, unmanifested form. And yet, metaphysically, they are the first thing that we can give name to, that we can apply our understanding to and perceive with the mind's eye. And all of this exactly connects to the esoteric understanding of Vayu in the other Vedic and post-Vedic esoteric texts, as this underlying principle of wind and air that gives rise to everything. That is, we could say, the chaotic flux. Even chaos in the Greek tradition is called one of the airs, and perhaps it is the one of the airs that may give rise to the other airs, Erebus and ether, but all of them are expressions of the underlying principle of air or wind. So even prior to chaos itself is the chaotic wind, and chaos is one of its first expressions. These are just unfoldings of one principle of chaotic wind or air that has vitality as its essence. Now the name Dáire means fertile. He is called Dáire, aka the fertile one. It can also mean tumultuous. But if we look at fertile / tumultuous, it can be slightly difficult to understand why this would specifically mean winds until we read a bit more about what prana is specifically. There is a hymn solely dedicated to prana in the Atharva Veda, and in this hymn we see that the most repeated quality of prana is that it is fertilizing, that it gives vitality, and specifically fertilization. It makes fertile. It is the fertile principle of all things, underlying all things. And here are a few pertinent selections from hymn 4 in book 11 of the Atharva Veda, a glorification of prana, the breath or vital spirit. Quote, "Homage to prana, him who hath dominion o'er the universe, who hath become the sovereign Lord of all, on whom the whole depends. Homage, O prana, to thy roar, to thunder peal and lightning flash. Homage, O prana, unto thee, what time thou sendest down thy rain. When prana with a thunderous voice shouts his loud message to the plants, they straightway are impregnate, they conceive and bear abundantly. When the due season hath arrived, and prana shouteth to herbs, then all is joyful, yea, each thing unto the surface of the earth. When prana hath poured down his flood of rain upon the mighty land, cattle and beasts rejoice thereat. Now great will be our strength, they cry. Watered by prana's rain, the plants have raised their voices in accord. Thou hast prolonged our life, they say, and given fragrance to us all. Homage to thee when coming nigh, homage to thee departing hence. Homage, O prana, be to thee when standing and when sitting still. Homage to thee at every breath thou drawest in and sendest forth. Homage to thee when turned away. Homage to thee seen face to face. This reverence be to all of thee. Prana, communicate to us thy dear, thy very dearest form. Whatever healing balm thou hast, give us thereof that we may live. Prana robes living creatures as a father his beloved son. Prana is sovereign Lord of all that breathes not, of all that breathes. Prana is fever, he is death. Prana is worshipped by the gods. Prana sets in the loftiest sphere the man who speaks the words of truth. Prana is Deshtri, and Viraj Prana is reverenced by all. He is the sun, he is the moon. Prana is called Prajapati. Homage, O Prana, unto thee, armed with swift bow among the rest, in whose dominion is this all of varied sort that stirs and works. He who rules this universe of varied sort that stirs and works. Unquote. And so we see that Prana sends down rains, and that Prana's shouting voice impregnates the plants and causes them to conceive and bear abundantly. All things are rejoiced by the rains, the floods, and the voice of Prana, which causes them to become fragrant, to become abundant, to live. Specifically, to become fertile. And so Prana is clearly compatible with this name Dáire, the fertile one, who is also the tumultuous one, the tumultuous winds in the primordial state. Prana gives rise to even lightning and rain, and this is why we see the Dagda as ruling over seemingly all sorts of cosmic forces, including even the sun. The Dagda has power over the sun because he is this primordial god of wind, or Prana, and this is an understanding that the Indo-Europeans had, that Prana even controls rain, lightning, and sun and moon themselves. If the Dagda was not this wind god, he could not have this power over sun and over even time itself, because time is also an expression of the movement of the primordial wind, or Prana. That is what it is. An essay by David Frawley details this specific universality of Vayu, of the wind god, in its esoteric dimensions. And I will say that I don't usually recommend the work of David Frawley, but my work supports the idea that the Gaelic mythology, theology, and metaphysics were nearly identical to the Vedic theology, mythology, and metaphysics. And so I have no problem sharing Frawley's work when it is clearly elucidating the esoteric understanding found in the Vedic corpus. And so here is a selection from Frawley's article, Vayu Rahasya, The Secret of Vayu. And Frawley thoroughly brings out this idea that the wind is that very first thing, that first element, which gives rise, indeed, to all the others, including lightning, rain, sun and moon, and time. All of these are manifestations of Vayu in the Vedic understanding, and we see this in the Gaelic mythology. Dáire, he is this first son of Dagda, which is another name of Breochan, who is the God principle, Brahman. And here I quote from Frawley, quote, Vayu is the power through which everything comes into manifestation and into which everything eventually returns. Vayu is not just the material element of air and space, but the cosmic principle of energy and space that pervades body, life, mind, and consciousness. The entire manifest universe arises from space and energy, which is Vayu at an outer level. At an inner level, Vayu stands for the formless principle of air and space, the invisible spirit, or Brahman, behind the visible world of the earth, water, and fire elements, the realm of name and form. The famous Shanti Path of the Taittiriya Upanishad declares this, quote, Namaste Vayo Tvam Eva Pratyaksham Brahmasi. O Vayu, you are the directly perceivable Brahman, unquote. Vayu often symbolizes the supreme deity, the spirit that is formless in nature yet full of power, like the wind or air. Vayu as the creative or causal power is the power of Ishvara or the cosmic lord. Yet Vayu as the receptacle of all power and the ground of all existence can symbolize the supreme Brahman as well. Vayu can indicate both Saguna and Nirguna Brahman. Vayu thus often means spirit, not just the air as an element, but the presence of being and consciousness that exists everywhere but cannot be seen anywhere. We find this idea of spirit or air in many spiritual traditions throughout the world, and in the very term spiritual. Vayu is the Kriya Shakti, or universal power of action, from which all other powers emerge. It is the causal power that guides and directs things. The entire universe is a manifestation of Vayu, which is the hand of God that shapes all things. Yet the very nature of Brahman is like Vayu, which is beyond all limitations, appearances, and divisions. So Vayu is more than action and ultimately connects to the formless, changeless reality that creates the entire universe without undergoing any modification itself. Vayu sets everything in motion at a cosmic level, which is his play or dance. Vayu governs all cosmic forces, movements, and actions, including the movement of the stars and galaxies, the gravitational network underlying the universe, electromagnetic forces, and the forces that govern subatomic particles. Everything exists in Vayu, which is the field of space as energized by air. Vayu is the very field of our existence, as well as the basis of our expression. Air, water, and earth are but different densifications of the energy of Vayu, different degrees of its many currents. And as an aside, this is why we see that things like Niflheim and Muspelheim, or like Erebus, the misty Erebus, and ether, these are expressions in the comparative sense of these airs, as Erebus and ether and chaos are all called the three airs. Just so the water and earth and air and fire are different densifications of Vayu. Vayu is also the connecting principle that links everything together in the universe. From it, mind, speech, and intelligence arise and allow communication and interchange on all levels. In the Rig Veda and the Vedas in general, it is the deities of the sphere of Vayu that predominate, like Indra, the foremost of the Vedic gods, who, as an aside, is one of the vital heirs, one of the most prominent vital heirs, who sets things in motion. Rudra, Brihaspati, and the Maruts. Indra is often called Vayu and Vata. Indra is behind all the other Vedic deities, including Agni, Surya, and Soma, the principles of fire, sun, and moon that can only operate under the guiding power of Vayu. Vayu, though by nature invisible, is not devoid of light, but is in fact the matrix of all forms of light. Vayu holds the power of lightning, or vidyut, that sets all other forms of light in motion, just as the atmospheric lightning starts fire on earth. As the power of lightning, Vayu is called Indra, the supreme Vedic deity who governs the power of perception and the higher prana. In yogic thought, like the Brihat Yoga Yajnavalkya Smriti, it is said that Ishvara is Vayu and the soul or Jiva is Agni. Yoga consists of expanding our individual fire to merge into the cosmic air. Vayu everywhere is the Ishvara or ruling principle, causing everything to move. Other Upanishadic Vidyas, ways of knowledge, like the Samvarga Vidya of the Chandogya Upanishad, identify Vayu as Brahman and the supreme resort of all. Such teachings are not identifying Brahman with the air element, but using the air element as a symbol for Brahman, as the supreme formless energy, power, and presence. And as an aside, like I said before, this is why Dáire is the son of Dagda, and Dagda is that Brahman principle, and Dáire is his son. Vayu is also said to be the sutra, the thread that links everything together in the Upanishads. It is the subtle or energy body that links all physical forms in a network of forces through the chakras that it creates in its movement. The cosmic Vayu, in turn, takes us eventually back to the self that is the ultimate presence that ties all things together. Vayu is the Shakti or cosmic power that electrifies everything, and without which everything is inert. Vayu manifests from the power of the Purusha as the energy inherent in consciousness, which is the power of Prana or life itself. The lightning force of Vayu creates life in creatures, but also sustains all processes in the universe. As such, all the Devis or forms of Shakti are connected to Vayu, particularly Kali, who represents the Vidyut Shakti and the Yoga Shakti that takes us back to Brahman. This primal lightning of Vayu is the source of sound, which is the energy vibrating in space, the thunder that arises from it. This primal sound is Pranava, the divine word, or Om, which also sets in motion the underlying cosmic intelligence that structures the worlds. As the principle of sound or vibration, Vayu is called Rudra, or Shiva, through which speech and language arises. Vayu as primal sound is Pranava or Om, which is the sound of Shiva's drum. Vayu at rest serves to create the ground of space. Vayu in motion creates the movement of time, which is the vibration of cosmic sound. The movement of time is the movement of cosmic prana. This power of time, or kala, is the main force of Vayu, through which everything moves and changes. Time, like Vayu, is responsible for birth, growth, decay, and death of all creatures, and for the beginning, middle, and end of all processes. Kala, or time, in turn, is connected with karma, or action, which is the effect of Vayu. Vayu carries and distributes all the karmas of living beings and the worlds or lokas in which they reside. Vayu holds the cosmic prana or life force, from which our individualized prana and our vata, the biological air humor, comes into manifestation. Vayu is the cosmic breath, which enters into the individual as the individual power of breath. In yogic thought, vata is also prana, or the cosmic life energy that manifests from akasha, or cosmic space. Prana is Vayu as the guiding force of life and intelligence in the universe. All the deities of prana, like Indra, Shiva, and Kali, relate to Vayu as well. Vayu holds the pranas of all living beings in its energy network that links them all together in the web of life. The soul is a portion of Vayu that has entered into the body with the help of fire or Agni. The purpose of pranayama is not just to bring in more air or give us power over the breathing process, but to link us up to the unlimited energy of the cosmic Vayu. This occurs when we unite the dualistic energies of prana and mind so that our awareness can enter into the unitary force of Vayu. The great prana mantras of Hamsa and Soham are the vibrations of prana, the nature sound of the breath that is the presence of Vayu resonating within us. Yet at a higher level, prana mirrors Sat, or pure existence, at a deeper level. Hamsa and Soham are the sounds of Aham, or the divine self. When the prana enters into the Sushumna, the individual prana connects to the cosmic Vayu, which allows our awareness to ascend and expand into Brahman. One must master Vayu in order to master any of the forces in the universe, in the body or in the mind. All healing occurs through the power of Vayu and its pranic manifestation. By connecting to the cosmic Vayu, we can bring in the cosmic Prana. That is the key to all higher healing. In yoga, the higher Prana, or cosmic Vayu, takes us into the realm of immortality by removing our attachment to the body and giving us back our freedom as formless awareness. The cosmic forms of Vayu are, in the earth or at a mineral level, Vayu is responsible for plate tectonics, for earthquakes, for earth currents, and the gases held beneath the ground. When this Vayu beneath the ground moves, all living beings quiver in fear, even human beings. In the biosphere, Vayu is the life wind which carries pollen, dust, prana, and is the home of airy creatures like birds. This benefic Vayu keeps our bodies and mind clean and energized by its purifying flow. In the atmosphere, Vayu is the force behind the weather, the clouds, the rains, and the seasons. Vayu is the dominant force of the atmosphere, just as Agni is on Earth. The atmosphere is dominated by Vayu as air, clouds, or gases in motion. Everything we see in the atmosphere is a form of Vayu, even the wind that has no form. The weather is mainly a force of Vayu. That is why exposure to the elements and changes of seasons mainly serves to increase Vata dosha. Vayu at the level of the solar system is responsible for the movement and revolution of the planets. The sun itself has its solar wind or solar Vayu, its electromagnetic forces that hold the solar system together. The stars are gaseous forms of fire sustained and generated by the powerful cosmic Vayu. And so this is why the Dagda has that power over the sun, to be able to move it, to stop it at will. At the level of the galaxy, Vayu is responsible for the movement and revolution of the stars. The galaxies themselves are smoke clouds created by the cosmic Vayu. Vayu governs the creation and equilibrium of the universe as a whole, yet stands beyond the universe as well. The Atman stands at the center of all the currents and forces of Vayu, which are but its outer expressions. If we hold to that center, then all the powers of the universe must revolve around us. Nothing in the world will be able to disturb us, just as the axis of a wheel cannot be disturbed by the movement of its periphery. The self is the Vayu behind Vayu, the source of all energy, power, and prana, hidden in the cavern of the heart. From the self in the heart radiate all energies and powers. The self is the link between all beings and all worlds. Resting in our own being, we can hold all power without trying to do anything at all. Unquote. And that is the excerpt from Frawley. Aurobindo adds to this, quote, Vayu is the lord of life. By the ancient mystics, life was considered to be a great force pervading all material existence and the condition of all its activities. It is this idea that was formulated later on in the conception of the prana, the universal breath of life. All the vital and nervous activities of the human being fall within the definition of prana and belong to the domain of Vayu. It is Agni who is master of tapas, the divine consciousness formulating itself in universal energy, of which the prana is only a representative in the lower being. Therefore, in Vamadeva's hymn, the 58th of the 4th mandala, it is Indra and Surya and Agni who effect the great manifestation of the conscious divinity out of the subconscient. Vata, or Vayu, the nervous activity, is only a first condition of the emergent mind. As for man, it is the meeting of life with mind and the support given by the former to the evolution of the latter, which is the important aspect of Vayu. Therefore we find Indra, master of mind, and Vayu, master of life, coupled together, and the latter, Vayu, always somewhat dependent on the former, Indra. The Maruts, the thought forces, although in their origin they seem to be as much powers of Vayu as of Indra, are more important to the rishis than Vayu himself, and even in their dynamic aspect are more closely associated with Agni Rudra than with the natural chief of the legions of the air." Unquote. And so this emphasizes the fact that Indra, who is the more active and organizing force between Indra and Vayu, gains more prominence in the Vedic religion. However, as we recall, Indra is an expression of Vayu. I also must mention that while Prana is clearly a form of Vayu, there is an esoteric question remaining. Elsewhere, we find that Rudra, or the Rudras, plural, are identified with Prana or the Pranas as well. We must then ask, is it possible that Rudra is in some way the essence or other identity of the Prana? Is it fair to say that Prana is Rudra Vayu, and which of the two identities takes us closer to the source of what Prana is? The user Trisula gives the following summary. Quote, "Vayu becomes the Sutratman, that is, the Sutra Atman, only as ensouled by Parameshvara, inasmuch as Vayu is one of the 8 forms of the Parameshvara, the Supreme Lord. Hence the conclusion that it is not Vayu. Mukhya Prana Vayu is stated to be one of the 8 forms of the Lord's Ashtamurti. Any praise of Vayu is a praise of Parameshvara, the Supreme Lord himself. The objection is that Ashtamurti Vayu is not Mukhya Prana but Pravaha. The response is statements such as the following. Quote, "The gaseous body of Ishana, that is the Lord Shiva, is stationed as the vital breath of all living beings, along with the functions of vital breaths." Unquote. From the Brahmanda Purana 1.2.10.70 through 75 and Vayu Purana 1.27.43. Clearly, this points to the vital breath only and not the physical wind. The Brahma Purana also says, quote, "For enhancement, progress, undecaying strength, the conduct of substance, and the manifold joy of beings, Isha, that is the Lord, Shiva, assumes the form of Vayu." Unquote. Brahma Purana 2, parentheses 6, translation Bibek de Broye. Also, this cannot refer to the mere physical wind. And this statement agrees with the Veda, which reads, quote, "Regarding this some say, since the air blows as one substance, how can it be 1.5? It is 1.5 because through its presence all this attains surpassing glory. Which is the one God? The Prana. It is Brahman, which is called Tyat, or that." Unquote. From the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad 3.9.9. Prana is the first manifestation of consciousness samvit. Out of the Sadhadavas, Varnadava is based on Varna's sounds, all of which emerge from the nada. It is Pranava, which is the all-pervading prana. But we shall not enter into the Shaivagamic lore, the lore of the Shaivites, here to explain what Mukhya Prana is. Our sole aim is to establish the Lord's supremacy here. Quote, "As small sparks come forth from fire, thus do all pranas come forth from that Brahman." Unquote. From the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad 2.1.20. We well understand Maruts, or Rudras, Maruts being a species of Rudra, are the pranas pervading all existence, their lord being Shiva. Furthermore, if it is argued based on the statement, quote, O Prana, you are Indra, you are Rudra by valor, you are the protector, you move in the sky, and you are the sun, the lord of all luminaries, unquote, from the Prashnopanishad 2.9, that Rudra is inferior to Prana, we remind the opponents of the verse, quote, this Prana is born of the Atman, unquote, from the Prashnopanishad 3.3. Who is this Atman? The text quotes, O Rudra, you are the binding knot of all pranas, unquote, from the Taittiriya Aranyaka 10.74.1. And to quote the Smriti, quote, he should strengthen and satisfy himself by repeating the mantra, Om, thou art the knot of pranas, thou art the Atman. Rudra is indeed Atman. That Rudra, the destroyer of subjects, he is the prana of the Atman. You are eldest among the devas, you are fierce, the skillful bull, you are the destroyer of death, unquote, from the Vayu Purana 1.15.8 through 9. The prana is the Omkara, the life force of all existence, and has many layers. Quote, Pranava is the life-giving breath of all living beings, established as their very life. Pranava encompasses everything, and through stages it impels towards Shiva, unquote, from the Netra Tantra 22.14. The prana then leads to Shiva and comes from Shiva, the Atman, alone. The Garuda Purana says as well, quote, Thou art the giver of renown, Shiva is the giver, Shiva is the enjoyer, Shiva is the entire world, Shiva is victorious everywhere. I am he who is Shiva. Whatever I have done, whatever I shall do, let everything be sacred unto thee. O Shiva, thou art the savior, the leader of the universe. I do not have any other lord. Unquote, from the Garuda Purana 1.23.26 through 29. Unquote. And as Stella Cromrish also states, quote, Rudra's mind-born sons, unlike Brahma's, did not all monotonously withdraw from the world. On the contrary, they activate the movement in creation. They are the breath, prana, of life. See Linga Purana 1.22.24 and Shiva Purana 1.12.25 through 30. They are the breath, prana, of life in beings, for Rudra is the origin of that breath. See Mahabharata 7.173.92 through 93. Unquote. And quote, Rudra had created his mind-born sons, hosts of turbulent Rudras. And notice the word turbulent being used of these Rudras, turbulent also being one of the definitions of the name Dáire. Although unpredictable and frightening, the Rudras, these uncanny vital powers, are recognized. They are to be accepted and worshipped along with the other gods. They are the movement of breath itself, prana, whose origin is Rudra, unquote. And, quote, the Rudras carried the breaths, pranas of the one Rudra, the Atman, the innermost self, into all there is. See Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad 3.9.4. They were concerned with all beings and permeated the three worlds. See Vayu Purana 9.80 through 81. See also Shiva Purana 7.1.12.29 through 30. The Rudras were the vital energies, the vital breaths, prana, in all that lived. See Shiva Purana 7.1.12.30 and Chandogya Upanishad 3.16.3. Unquote. And, quote, Rudra issued from his mouth, that is Brahma's mouth, the breath of life, prana, itself, and became Ardhanarishvara. See Linga Purana 1.41.35 through 43, unquote. And finally, quote, Shiva is the primordial yogi, the guardian of creative energy, master of the discipline of its preservation, and also master and teacher of all the other arts that capture and give form audibly and visibly to the realization of ultimate reality. Incarnated in Lakulisha, the great yogi is shown absorbed in meditation. his powerful body taut with the breath of life, Prana, that sustains creation. He is seated cross-legged in hieratic symmetry on an open lotus. Wide-petaled, the lotus has unfolded in its rocky setting, on a long stalk straight as a pillar, a symbol of the cosmic pillar that traverses and holds together the universe." Unquote. If this is true and accurate, then in summary, this implies that Finn, the Gaelic Rudra-type god, could esoterically be seen as the essence of the Dagda as well. Now, with all this in mind, let's return to the Dagda. As these commentators have hinted, the prana, or breath of the Absolute, is comparable to the concept of spiritus, or Holy Spirit, as found in the Old Testament, who is straightforwardly identified as the breath, or ruach, of God. Most famously, in the moment of creation, Genesis states that the Spirit, who is the breath of God, moved over the waters of the deep, tehom. Scholars have also noted that this runs parallel to the myth of the Sumerio-Babylonian Marduk defeating Tiamat, a monster who personifies the primordial waters and whose name appears to be cognate with the Hebrew word used here in Genesis, tehom, the deep. The water monster Tiamat is the linguistic and functional parallel of the waters of the deep from the Bible, tehom. Although Marduk isn't the wind god per se, he still specifically uses the wind to defeat Tiamat, and it appears that he has stepped into a role that may previously have belonged to Ninurta or Enlil, closer parallels of the wind god type. Thus, in both Genesis and the Sumerian creation myth, the primordial winds are what appear to be pacifying or taming the primordial waters in the moment of creation. Read now the passage known as the Dinishenhas of Moy Murhevnia, in which it is none other than the Dagda who defeats an octopus monster who apparently embodies the primordial waters, his domain being Murhevnia, meaning dark or obscure ocean. When the monster is defeated, the waters recede from the land. And specifically, the Dagda uses his club of strong breeze, Anudha, to defeat this monster and dry up the primordial waters. Once again, he is using the wind to dry up and defeat the primordial water monster. Quote, Moy Murhevnia, whence the name? Not hard to say. The sea covered it 30 years after the flood, and hence it is called Murhevnia, that is, darkness of the sea, or it is under the sea's roof. Or there was a magic sea over it, and an octopus therein, having a property of suction. It would suck in a man in armor till he lay at the bottom of its treasure bag. The Dagda came with his mace of wrath, that is, Lorg Anudha, his staff of strong breeze, in his hand, and plunged it down upon the octopus, and chanted these words, Turn thy hollow head, turn thy ravening body, turn thy resorbent forehead, avaunt, begone! Then the magic sea retired with the octopus, and hence, may be, the place was called Moy Murhevnia. Unquote. So, can we say that the Dagda, and specifically Dagda Dara, who is the Prana, is in a sense the Gaelic Holy Spirit, the breath of the Absolute? My book, Taliesin's Map, The Comparative Guide to Celtic Mythology, is available from Amazon. Link in the description.